Continuing with our evolution conversation, what are results of natural selection? Natural selection is going to pass on favorable traits. So when those favorable traits are passed on, the population will increase. Now, those who don't have traits that are favorable for the current wherever they live or whatever the conditions are, then they will become extinct if they can't evolve. And then you'll see new species arise. Here's some ideas of natural selection. This is a great, being able to camouflage are great ways to survive. If we look at 3 types of selection, natural selection patterns, we're looking at stabilizing. So stabilizing, this is the original population, and in stabilizing they stay somewhat in the middle of the population. So this is looking at the phenotype of fur color. Then directional would be where the population is increasing in a direction. Oh my goodness. Increasing in a direction either to the left or to the right, either increasing or decreasing. And then disruptive is where they break into more than one type of population. You have diversifying there. So not necessarily a bad thing. So the natural selection controversy that shows different types of beliefs. Some believe that we come from one and then split into several, or we gradually change over time. Natural selection as far as bacteria goes, it evolves and survives. As a matter of fact, viruses or bacteria are the original historical pattern, meaning the oldest. These species change over time. What do you think? According to what they believe, evolution started with one common ancestor, and over time we branched out into different organisms. I can't move that right now. Let's see if I can see it. What is a common ancestor? Well, here's their ancestor. And then as time, either the environment, like we talked about the finches, they had to eat seeds, so they had to change their beak to accommodate where they lived. Again, when we look at these trees, we're going to see that they branch out to show different diversity, showing that these are all connected in some way. This is his ancestor. Those two are related, so these are all family, and so on and so forth. Macroevolution and microevolution. Macroevolution is large changes in population, like diversifying, major diversification, especially in this little picture. And then micro is where it's small changes within the population. So, is there evidence from ideas of evolution? Sure. We see DNA, embryology, where all our embryos, we saw that. Embryos were all identical as they began. Biogeography, that's talking about location, where we were Pangea as one, and then as we split apart, our continent split apart, we had more diversified animals or living organisms. Fossil records have shown that as well. And anatomy, comparative anatomy, which we talked about as well, where we have the same structure of bones in our arms and things like that. So that kind of makes us common ancestors based upon those concepts. Molecular evidence is showing you the DNA sequencing, where, as we know, we are very common to even a banana. That our most common ancestors are, again, right here, showing us how we are close to the primates. Again, here's your embryology, showing us all identical through our evolution. These are lizard, tortoise, pig, human. Don't look much different, do they? And even as they continue to evolve, they look very similar. This is where we have a little bit of differentiation. Yeah, fossil records. We've seen fossil records showing evidence of evolution from different locations where they find them. In icebergs, tar, amber, sediment rock. They leave impressions like teeth and bone. We're going to do a project with our dinosaurs to draw those, right? But again, as time goes on, we're able to have that sediment to be able to extract those fossils. Using fossil records, we're able to determine, like here's a horse. I actually showed you a horse before. Here's what they look like in evolution in just a drawing, but here are some skeletal remains for you to see the fossils left behind. And like we said, we started out as Pangea, where the whole entire continent was as one, and then it splits apart, and now we see more diversity, being able to live in different locations. Here are our comparative anatomy, where we have the homologous, meaning the same. So noticing that we all have these same bones in our arms or fins or wings. And then that means they're all similar structures. Different structures, but for the same purpose. Analogous. So analogous means the same, similar. So they're using for the same purpose. Homologous means they look the same. Analogous means they're made for the same use. And vestigial is showing it has no purpose, right? We have parts in our body that doesn't really have any purpose, like our appendix, our third molars, which are our wisdom teeth. Most people can't have them, but some people can. Are there types of evolution? Well, divergent, convergent. Divergent would be when they go away from one another, creating more diversity. Convergent is where the species comes together over time. Mechanisms of evolution. How does evolution happen? Well, we have mutations of DNA that create, just like we see with the coronavirus, it's mutating, creating more different genotypes. And then natural selection, as we evolve or based upon limited resources, competition, where we live, things like that, we'll see change. Gene flow, that can be a quick change where you have evolution of the species based upon migration or immigration and movement of the population. Genetic drift, gene pool, all the possible alleles. Bottleneck effect, change in allele frequency. Non-random mating, means sexual selection and choosing a mate based upon their characteristics. That's what a lot of animals do. They pick the best mate based upon what are you going to provide me for the future. How does mutations and natural selection, we talked about this, that if you're passing on favorable traits, then you continue to evolve into a better organism. And that's what it's trying to do, is pass on the best traits to create the best organism for the environment it is in, whether it be mutating its beak to become the best qualified for the food that's available. I mean, if you are, for example, if I were a specialist and I only ate bananas, then I would starve to death if there were no bananas. So I need to be diversified in my eating. So I need to be a generalist in order to consume different types of food. So those who create different types of beaks in birds are actually allowing them to be more diversified and have the traits to be favorable to pass on. So kind of the idea. So what do? They pass it on to survive and give it to their children to carry it on, and it increases population. And natural selection is all about nature decides. It decides what's going to happen, whether the species is going to evolve into a greater species or less. And it's based upon, for example, there's a story about Yellowstone where they took out the wolves. When they took those out, it created a problem in the environment. Once they replaced them, put them back, then everything restored. The whole ecosystem in Yellowstone returned. And that goes to show you that that's natural selection. And when we get ourselves involved, like in the case of Yellowstone, we took those wolves out and we had to put them back because what we did created an imbalance. And so, again, it has to keep that balance for natural selection to work its best, keeping those great traits, those best traits, moving forward. What drives natural selection? Selection pressure. Conditions that drive natural selection are food availability. This is huge. having food available, habitats, as we continue to cause deforestation and climate change, we're going to see more food issues, habitat problems, and competition's huge. We see that in lions and tigers, and you kind of get the idea, I'm sure. So when you're looking at two lions competing, what are you looking for? The most aggressive, the one that's bigger, the one that's going to fight and win. The women look at him as, does he have the qualities to pass on to the future and provide offspring that are most qualified and will be the most dominant qualified organisms. We already talked about this, so we'll pass on to that. What is artificial selection? It's us deciding what we want. So when you go to pick out that puppy, well, I want this type of dog. Well, that's selecting it specifically for its traits, and that is artificial selection. Gene flow, migration. Organisms move from one population to another, change in phenotype of the population. So you're seeing change in the organisms. Gene flow is the ability of those genes to flow in the direction that is most successful. Migration, I'm sure you know what that is. Just like we have butterflies and birds migrate different places, you have organisms in different places requiring different things. So we talked about skin color being one of those. As we move closer to the equator, we need more of the pigment to create the darker complexion in order to be sustainable in that environment. As you move further away from the equator, you don't really need that as much. Genetic drift. We have the dramatic reduction of alleles in a gene pool, meaning you're having less and less diversity, which is not a good thing. It greatly reduces genetic variation, which is what I just said. And then bottleneck effect, you'll see that there. What does that mean? That it's so small that it's difficult to pass on those traits because it's so, it's a critical event. It's something that's going to prevent the organism from continuing to move forward. So here we are with our bottleneck effect. A small population undergoes a sudden and dramatic reduction in size, which then creates this dramatic problem with population. They have an issue with surviving. So that is a serious issue with natural selection. If you get to this point of bottleneck, you're looking on the verge of extinction. Examples, the seals, northern elephant seals, and that's because of us. We have caused this because we hunt them, and that's caused a reduction in their population, which now has less diversity and creating an opportunity for extinction. We've done this to a few organisms. The eagle, however, was one of those in the bottleneck effect, but now they have found a comeback, and that is due to human interaction. We've created environments where they can succeed, and now we're potentially getting ready to release them back. And well, we've seen them around Indiana. Me personally, we have friends who've shown us pictures that they've seen them. Another one is, I just forgot what it was, but there was another one I was thinking of that. The California condor, huge bird, that they repopulated as well in a conditioned environment, and now they're ready to release them back into the wild. So, opposite, we're trying to fix the bottleneck effect, right? What is a founder's effect? If the individuals are isolated from their original group, they form a new one. So remember, that's how we get diversity, as organisms create offspring that are different from their ancestors, we're creating diversity. I think we'll stop there. That seems like a good spot to stop, and we'll continue later.